Hello and welcome to the second video in this tutorial series on 3DS Max. This time around we're going to be talking about editing in a bit more detail. When using move and select, you're going to be going around and it's not going to be very precise. There's one other way that you can move this object around while you're in move and select. At the bottom here where the location of the pivot is, that is also how you're going to move the object. So there is a standard rule in 3ds Max of creating objects and putting them to world center so you know where they are. World center is simply 0, 0, 0. And that puts this object in the center of the world along where these two black lines are on this grid. You can also edit it so that you can have it say 50 out or even however much number you need it out to be. Along with being able to move an object about with precision, there's another thing you can do to make precision objects. So I'm going to create a cylinder now, and oh, I've made that a bit too high. And I could go in and scale it, but that doesn't give me exact numbers, that's still a guessing game. So what I can do is I can come over to, either if I've unselected it, like I did there, I can come over to modifier, and I can change parameters here, in this small submenu. So I'm wanting to have a nice even radius of 20, and I'm wanting to have a height of 50, and all I have to do is change the numbers, and it changes the object. Underneath this you'll see height segments, cap segments, and sides. This is the amount of edges and polygons this object's going to have, but at the moment you can't see any. The reason for this is the type of view style you're looking at it in. At the moment you're just looking at it in realistic. To change this, you can go into realistic, and now you have all these different settings. So you can go to shaded, which doesn't show you it still, but it's just another type of view so that if you have lots of objects, you'll be able to see them when there's no shadows. The one that you're going to want to select is edge faces, and now you can see these wireframe blocks appear on top of the mesh. These are all the edges and the polygons that the object has. I'm also going to change this object's color just quickly. So changing object's color is just as simple. It's in create and geometry, and it says name and color here. So you could rename it so meh, and change its color to, let's have a blue. I said blue. Right, and that makes it a lot easier to see all of these edges. Now back to what I was saying about the segments and caps. This is the amount of lines and edges it's going to have. So if I give it a cap segment now, you see that a cap appears on the cylinder. If I were to drop the amount of sides this object has, you'll see that it becomes less. And if I were to make the number of height segments more, you'll see that this cylinder now has 8 height segments. This can be very powerful when you're trying to edit it. If you haven't unselected it, you can do the exact same thing when you're building it. So I want to have a perfect cube here, so let's go 30, 30, 30. And now I have a perfect cube. But this only has one segment to each place. So I'm going to change this so I have lines going across all the faces. Now I have 4 to the top, 4 to the side, and 4 to basically everywhere. Now, as I said, this can be done with absolutely any shape. So here's a sphere, and spheres have a bit more of a complex interface, but all you have to know is that they can all have their parameters changed and the amount of sides they have. So I could put this up to an insane number, let's say 100, and now those are very tiny, but that is a lot of edges on this object. Now I'm going to talk about the extended primitives, which are another type of primitive you can use in 3ds Max. So let's just get into a good viewport here, and in create again in geometry, in this drop down, under standard you have extended primitives. Now these are the more complex shapes which 3ds Max can make, well some of the more complex. So you have stuff like a hydra, which is a diamond shaped object. You have a torus knot, which is extremely hard to make sure it gets right. You have a chamfered box, which is a box, but instead of being an edible poly to chamfer, you chamfer it as the object itself. Same principle applies to the sphere, to the cylinder, although not as well. Then you have the oil tank, which, if I can find a space for it, does this. You have the capsule, which looks more like a pill. You have the spindle, which, if you do that, is basically a cylinder with 2 cones. You have a left exit, well, a left X, so that's like having a wall in a game. Obviously I haven't looked that one up. A geogon, if I can ever get the geogon to work. You have a CX, which is a C-facing wall. It's because the reason why they called this is that if you look at it, it's a C. If you look at that one, it's an L. The ring wave, which you do this, and it looks rather complex, and you may use that for some sort of shattering effect. You have a hose, which, if you're doing any like sort of modelling around hoses and pipes, you can use this as a basis. You've got the final one, which is a prism. So we'll find a space for that one. A prism is this. It's like a cylinder, only it's a prism object instead. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it informative.